Welcome. You're listening to Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis. Today we're going to be talking about some of the supposed leaks or the claim of a massive intel dump in the realm of 4chan. And what we're going to do is this is going to be an exercise in analysis. So even though I do not believe that this is really some kind of high Q level security clearance that is supposed to be dropping a lot of information that's going to lead to hundreds of indictments based on child porn and all this kind of stuff, and the end of the Hillary Clinton Podesta dynasty. I do think that it's relevant to look at this, and we're going to use it as a kind of exercise in terms of how to do analysis. I know that a lot of my listeners like to learn this kind of stuff. So we're going to go through a lot of information. We're going to go through a lot of articles. And I put the last several days nonstop into this. I read probably 200-300 pages worth of stacks of articles. And so I've sifted through to try to find the most relevant information. And we're going to look at that. And I'm going to try to give you my take on this. Again, not because I think that this is a real, quote, leak, but rather because I think that it's instructive. It's going to be useful for ferreting out true and false information. And as a result, I think you're going to be much better of a researcher and an analyst yourself. So we're going to start with some of these questions. I don't know if I'll get to every one of these because there's so many. And in a way, yes, it's helpful for somebody to say, you know, here are some of the right questions. But we'll also, I think, see that this intel dump is, while useful, a little bit partisan. We're going to avoid a lot of other questions that could be relevant. And at the same time, other reasons I'm skeptical is that the first proper vantage point that one should take on a so-called leak is skepticism. That's the proper vantage point. Precisely because, as John Young says in that RT video where they interview him about crypto and leaks, which I've posted many times, you know, he's correct to say right away that leaks should first and foremost be doubted, because most of the time leaks are done as targeted leaks, right? Think of the Panama Papers and how this was the Tides Foundation. This was Soros funded so-called independent journalists. They were not. They ridiculously posted who their supporters are, which is all the big leftist foundations. At the same time, the new Panama Papers leak this week, again, yes, there's some true information in there. It's just like WikiLeaks, right? There's true information in these leaks, but we can't immediately just wholeheartedly accept that what we're being presented with is true and accurate. We have to be a little more sophisticated, a little more skeptical, and really it takes a lot of research and a lot of time to figure out, you know, who really pulls the strings in the world. And what we're going to do in this video is kind of delve into that. And there are aspects of this that are true, and it looks as if Sessions is now considering the investigation into Hillary, right? So the Podesta law firm does appear to be unraveling. So, but we're not going to, again, assume that this Q poster questionnaire person is a real legitimate leaker. I keep thinking of Q from Star Trek. And if you go to my Instagram, I have a funny picture where back in the day when I was a nerd at one time, I'm still kind of a nerd, but as you can see here, my Q staring at Deanna Troy's phasers, her double phasers. I keep thinking of Q from Star Trek and Next Generation because I made faces at Q back in the day when I was at a comic convention with a friend of mine who's a comic artist, and I thought it would be funny to make faces at Q. I'll show that later. But anyway, so the first question is, what are state secrets and how are they upheld in the Security Council? Well, state secrets are essentially the way that the government covers their criminality. national security as a classification, as a means by which you can control the flow of information and basically shut down any real investigation of covert operations, black market operations, networks, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a kind of cover. And so what has to be done here is civilian trials. The Q questioner asks, maybe, I don't know. There's always this perpetual repeating of why is this relevant. And another reason I'm doing this, by the way, is that I started getting these Twitter questions a couple days ago saying, "Are you Q?" And I'm like, what are you talking about? Am I Q? I'm thinking somebody found that picture of me making faces at John Delancey from Star Trek. Am I Q? That doesn't make any sense. No, are you Q from this 4chan stuff? So the next question is, what is Flynn's background? So if we think about Flynn's background, let's look at some of that here. The reason Flynn is problematic, as we said, is because he is a Democrat. And he's a Democrat who was, for a time, right, used by, was in the Trump cabinet, as we said. And it's going to be huge, what I'm going to tell you, it's going to be huge. What's huge about this is that Flynn was open about what was going on with ISIS. And he has, an impressive background. He has a lot of credibility. And that's why it was such a big deal that they had to get rid of this guy. And I'm not saying that he's not in some way probably shady. I mean, I think anybody at the general level is probably compromised to some degree. But if you read about this guy, even from like this Cosmopolitan article, and I've got it on the reader version of it just because there's so many ridiculous pop-ups of just nonsense Cosmopolitan crap junk in your face that you can't even read the article. So that's why this is gray here. But the point is that his military career gives him a bit of credibility. And that when he discussed Al-Qaeda, he was very open. And we can look over here at this article in Al Jazeera, where Flynn talked about everything that the U.S. is doing is helping to radicalize Iraqis and helping to strengthen Al-Qaeda, right, and ISIL, ISIS, all this stuff, right? So that, in other words, Flynn was being honest about what was going on with ISIS, and probably he wasn't even really saying as much as he probably wanted to, right? It's not just that we're helping radicalize or something like that. It's a direct support from Western intelligence and from Saudis and from aspects of the GCC countries, networks in the GCC countries, Turkey and Jordan, right? That's what's going on with the support of ISIS. So Flynn had to get rid of him because he was talking about what was going on in Syria too. He's talking about how the major elements of what's going on in Syria is these guys that we're supposed to be fighting: Muslim Brotherhood, Salafists, right? So why, if we're fighting ISIS and these characters, Muslim Brotherhood, are we at the same time aiding and supporting them? So Flynn was putting out there what we ought to know is we know is the real issue, but a lot of people still haven't figured this out. They haven't figured out that it's the West, it's the CIA that and Western intelligence agencies that are really funding, aiding, and abetting these jihadis to be their kind of proxy army, and that's just made abundantly clear. And that's where you're getting that the U.S. is basically to blame for ISIS. So Flynn knows good and well that that's true, and he's probably not saying as much as he would like to, but that's why this is such a big deal and why they're coming after him. And again, this doesn't mean he's necessarily some angel, but that's why he's being targeted by the FBI and these characters about, because he was involved in lobbying. If they went after lobbyists, there would be nobody who was free, who wasn't behind bars, in D.C. I mean, they would all be in jail. But Flynn's connections to Peter Thiel and Palantir, I think that's suspicious. That shows that he's obviously not an angel character. But Flynn is also open about not being a social justice warrior. So he's tweeted a lot of things that have made the SJWs mad. And we know that, as we're going to see, the Soros operation is really, in terms of the last few decades, behind the SJW menace, the rise of the army of the genderless slugs and worms known as SJWs. So let's look, now that we've covered here Flynn, we see why Flynn is important and his background is important according to these so-called leaks from Q. Let's move on to the next one. So next up is there are questions, and I'm not going to do every question. I'm skipping it. I mean, we don't know if Trump was asked to run by some secret good guy, angel, white hat group in the government. Maybe. But the next important section is the question of the rigging, where it became obvious that Hillary... now, we knew this already, but here you have the top Democratic woman here, the face of the Democrats, this black woman, Donna Brazile, talking about Clinton's secret takeover of the DNC, which dealt with both money from the Clinton Foundation as well as the rigging of the election so that it wouldn't be Bernie Sanders. Now, everybody already knew this. Come on, give me a break. But the question is, why is Donna Brazile coming out and saying this? And I think that Patrick Henningsen is right in his analysis that what's going on here is that the left, the Democratic establishment, and the Republican establishment, they're willing to sacrifice Hillary. In fact, they're more willing to sacrifice Hillary and probably the Podestas than to get rid of Russiagate and the Russian collusion narrative, which is complete fake news and completely made up, as we're going to see from the Fusion GPS MI6 nonsense and all the fake news about Russiagate. But the point is that given Donna Brazile's rejection of Hillary, this signifies that Hillary is most likely being thrown to the wolves. And cleverly, though, within this article, you'll see that Donna Brazile does not give up the Russian collusion narrative. Let's see where she... Yeah, see, Russia still hacked the election, right? But it's time to get rid of Hillary. Now, this is going to get really confusing because confusion GPS, we could say, because when we look at the Uranium One thing, which we will hear in a minute, we're going to see that there is collusion with corporations in Russia. Now, this is not the entirety of Russia any more than Hillary is the entirety of America. There is, as Dugan talked about, a kind of fifth column of corporate and media and NGO elites in Russia that function as a kind of subversive entity. So Carnegie Endowment, CFR publications in Russia, Fortune 100 companies in Russia, et cetera, et cetera. These are the elements of the octopus in Russia, just like the elements of the octopus that sit perched atop the United States, like a giant Count Dracula from Transylvania sucking on the neck of the people, like a juice box, like a high-C juice box. So that's what's going on, is that they're constantly covering their tracks, basically, is what's happening here. So she's covering her tracks here. Donna Brazile senses where the wind's blowing. It's time to ditch Hillary and the Podestas. It's way too much scandal there. Now, does that mean that we know for sure that they're going to actually be indicted and arrested? I'll believe that when I see, Hillary with the actual jumpsuit on. Of course, Hillary would actually probably like prison because it's like a giant lesbian fest, in women's prison. So I don't imagine Hillary will be out of place there. But the Podestas, I don't know how they're gonna, if they end up in jail, I don't know. This is probably not going to happen. But we are seeing this in the news of Sessions at least considering or talking about it. But again, it could be talk. That and Donna Brazile, that doesn't prove the Q leak, nor does the unraveling of the Podesta law firm. They could be just coincidental. We don't know yet. We'll know, again, I'll believe it when I see Hillary in orange as the new black attire. Now, before we move on to the Russian collusion nonsense, I want to stress what I brought up on some previous episodes of Boiler Room, where we have in foreign policy, again, not too long ago, September 12th, that the Pentagon is spending $2 billion still running Soviet-era guns to Syrian rebels. And who are the Syrian rebels? Well, of course, we know that it's no more than the radicals, the jihadis, right, that are hell-bent on toppling Assad. And this is the failed attempt to take down Assad that's been going on for, since 2011, and was planned back into the Bush administration, as we've covered many times in my videos. Now, this is still going on, though. So, what exactly Trump's kind of gone back and forth on this. He's flip-flopped on Syria. But again, this hasn't worked. The U.S. has not achieved in Syria what they hope to achieve in the Wesley Clark Seven Nations Plan, the Oded Yanan Plan, the Greater Israel Plan. That has not worked. And what we have here is the continuation of the arms running. And there was also, I believe, other articles right around the same time that were also extending this out to other networks of arms being sent to the Syrian rebels. And again, this is all PR here to sell them as rebels, just like when the Mujahideen were the freedom fighters under Reagan, and then they become the enemies, right, as Al-Qaeda, and then they become the good guys again, and back and forth, just like in Orwell. But here you have, again, it's still public, still right here. And who do you think is sending these guns to the Syrian rebels? Well, we're going to find out here in a little bit. And the reason this is all relevant is that this is the Imperium, the empire, and its narrative and its mythology is beginning to collapse, as we're going to see, especially with this Russian narrative now. So let's look at the Russian narrative. Media, all the fake media, has been pushing the Russian narrative for, and prior to the, once Trump was elected and then into the election, it became nothing but the Russian collusion narrative. Nothing has taken hold. They've not found any substantial anything except for this spoof CIA claim, which we're going to see. Vault 7, if you recall, mentioned that the CIA has the ability to spoof these so-called hacks and so forth and so on when it comes to trying to track down the IP addresses of where the attacks are coming from, right? No actual evidence that it was Russians who hacked the DNC, but in fact, it's Seth Rich, right? Obviously, Seth Rich handed it over because he saw the corruption, and Seth Rich, now dead. Let's put two and two together here, pretty obvious. So what do we have now? We have all of these establishment fake Democrats coming out, and dumb, not funny comedians like Al Franken, where it sounds like, oh yeah, we need to protect ourselves from the big tech threat of Google and Facebook, and he'll say all this good stuff about privacy and not living in Orwell and all this gobbledygook. But guess what? What is it? Oh, it's because of Russia's manipulating our election. So it's not the fault of Facebook and Google. No, Facebook, Google, and these CIA created entities out of In-Q-Tel, they actually need to censor people, he'll go on to say, that aren't going along with this narrative. So this is total bullshit. And they just keep pushing this bullshit nonstop. And everything comes under the Russia manipulation narrative. Now, what is the actual evidence of the Russia? Well, there's been none in a year. What's the actual evidence? We've got the whole establishment scurrying to they've tried faking stuff with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele and the PP Gate and BuzzFeed, all of which was fake, admittedly now. made up. They've tried the Macedonian hacker scam, right? Absolutely no proof that that's... How do you prove that, little clickbait, stupid bouncing titty ads on Facebook is what swayed everybody's votes in the election? Give me a break. Come on. So now we're being told that it's abusive language on Facebook. This is the new narrative that we saw in foreign policy as well. The reason that migrants and ISIS and radicals, jihadists are attacking is because of abusive Facebook language. So now people are we need to ban more people from Facebook and social media because it's actually influencing too many people and it's hurting the feelings of, quote, migrants. Now, this is 100% a planned scam, targeted attack at the existing population of America to actually tear them down and destroy them. And that's why you see people who actually tell the truth, like myself. I'm the one that gets banned from Facebook, right? Because of, terms that are not allowed. But really, this is targeted algorithms that they keep saying you need to make these targeted algorithms better because it's destroying our democracy. Democracy doesn't exist. Democracy is a scam. And that's what these people need to be called out for, is being the front men for this giant scam run by oligarchs, billionaire oligarchs. And these are the characters who are front men for Soros. Perfect example of the billionaire oligarch in the background of democracy. Exactly what Plato said millennia ago, that democracy is nothing but a scam for wealthy oligarchs. You can't find a better example, a better incarnation. I mean, Soros is the avatar of this, the billionaire oligarch who puts phony balonies like Al Franken, right, up as the face in front of, quote, democracy. That meanwhile, they just make up all these fake stories about Russia hacking. And then they have not found a single thing yet. Why have they not? It's a year now and they haven't come up with anything. Well, oops, except for the fusion. Except for the uranium one. Oops, but that actually implicates the entire DNC congressional, a large portion of the elected quote-unquote officials, part of this giant deal, and foreign money and giving mineral rights over to foreign corporations. I mean, come on. This is Hillary at the heart of this, at the heart of it, and a lot of her her Democrat campaign people and corporate entities. So as we see, this doesn't work. Now, the QLARP is saying, oh, was this all the plan all along? Now, that's possible because a lot of these characters would know that Hillary would be entirely wrapped up in the mineral rights for selling the mineral rights in Kazakhstan to Uranium One in Russia. So it's possible that they did bait the Democrats and Hillary into basically exposing themselves as the real colluders. But again, notice that the collusion here is not election rigging that they're accusing Trump of. The collusion and rigging is Hillary. So what you start to notice here is that at every point, what they're accusing people of, I'm talking about the establishment as a whole here, when they bring out these fake news stories of accusation, it's every time it's what they're doing. They're the ones involved in the shady deals with the corporations in other countries. They're the ones receiving campaign donations from Saudi Arabia, like huge amounts, right? Remember the Hillary campaign, pay to play? This all came out in WikiLeaks. They're the ones that are promising kickbacks and pieces of the pie when she gets in and is able to divvy up countries like Libya. That was in the WikiLeaks. Remember, she's talking about Gaddafi's got gold. We can get Gaddafi's gold. That's in her emails, in the WikiLeaks emails, right? She's talking about who's going to get what slices of the pie when they destroy Libya. And it's no different for what they plan in Syria. So in other words, a lot of these scam artists, a lot of these billionaires had money put into and betting on Hillary winning so that they would be assured of slices of the pie. And when she didn't win, that's what got so many of these people in the establishment freaked out is that they were expecting a lot of money to come back to them based on putting their fake scam money into the Hillary campaign. That's really how this all works. That's the big scam. That's what the pay-to-play stuff is. And we're going to see this as we delve further into the Russian collusion narrative. That's why they keep having to push the Russian collusion narrative, and they can't let it go. However, it does look like they're starting to be the victims, or excuse me, they've tied the rope around their own necks here. They're putting their foot in their own mouth because they're the ones that were actually involved in these foreign deals. And it's not just, quote, Russian companies. It's numerous foreign operations that are actually illegal, as we'll see. Now, you thought we were done there. No, it's going to get even crazier. We're going to enter into crazy land, 33rd degree dimension. Spain sees Russian interference in Catalonia separatist vote. So the CIA here in Spain and the NGO and all the Western NGOs here have activated to try to paint Russia again as the bad guy, in the fact that the Catalan activists want separation from the EU. They don't want to be part of this Soviet superstate. It's actually NATO and the West and the bankers that want the real New World Order superstate, as we're going to see from this secret EU army deal that's being pushed through in the midst of all this smoke and mirror stuff that's going on. But I mean, this just shows the extent, and by the way, it shows the coordinated global scam at work here, right? It's not just the American officials and establishment that are trying to concoct the Russian collusion narrative. It's also Spain. And it's also, right, the NATO, EU. It's the entire Western establishment that's run by these degenerates that's concocting this totally made-up narrative. And we're a year into this, and they can never produce anything evidential beyond so-called experts, so-called intelligence agents, shadowy people that they never name. And when they talk about the proof, it's supposed to be some IP address or something like that. But we know, again, from Vault 7, that the CIA can easily spoof IP addresses. So this in no way constitutes evidence. It gets even goofier. Pokemon Go is being used by Russian-linked hackers. How in the fuck does Pokemon Go aid Russian hackers? I mean, this is really the bottom of the barrel, and even some of the alt media idiots lashed onto this and tried to claim that Russia was behind Black Lives Matter and Antifa. No, it's George Soros that's behind Antifa and Black Lives Matter. There's no question about it. But I mean, this just shows you the absurdity of it. And then here, Sulu himself tries to get in on the action. It's the Russian bots. Russian bots. Russian bots are after me. Pokemon Go. George Takei had an out-of-this-world explanation for why he was being accused of sexual assault. Russian bots spread the story. And, I mean, come on. This is just, it just reaches the level of beyond. What do you even say to this stuff? Now remember, what did Vault 7 show? That the CIA has the ability to spoof addresses and make it appear to come from anywhere. So this is undoubtedly true. This is not fake. That means then that these claims have the one thing that they claim is evidence has absolutely no standing. They have no basis at all for any of the Russian act. It's just completely 100% made up. And that's exactly what Vault 7 is about. Not only did this CIA malware have the ability to hack and spy through anything iPhone, Android, or smart TV. It's also your dishwasher. We know from Petraeus saying that in Wired Magazine several years ago. It's also the ability, I printed all this out and read it, by the way. I think I covered this in a video months ago, but there's somewhere in here it talks about actually spoofing the addresses, that they can make it appear to be anywhere. And the point is that this is really the background of probably a lot of the accusations. You know, you hear this a lot, that, oh, China hacked the U.S., Russia hacked Target, China hacked Ashley Madison. Or this could either be the companies themselves, or this is what's doing the hacking. It gets even crazier. Reuters, former Yahoo CEO apologizes for data breaches. It blames the Russians. Now, again, maybe there are some Russian hackers. Okay, now I'm not saying that there are no Russian or Chinese hackers, but none of these people ever mention the possibility of the Vault 7 CIA technology, which allows them to spoof attacks from anywhere. Why do they never mention that? And why is it, in other words, this shady character here 100% in line with the Democratic GOP Western scam establishment? She's fully backing up these accusations and fake news. So we know, in other words, she's in line with, the Silicon Valley Democratic Party GOP establishment slime balls. She's 100% behind them. She's the one, again, reinforcing the Russian collusion narrative by extension, by this totally made up, oh, sorry, everything that we lost in Yahoo, that was all the fault of, that was all the Russian hackers again. So these omnipotent Russian hackers. Now remember what Nina pointed out, great point that she made last year. None of these narratives make any sense at all. On the one hand, the Western establishment is constantly saying that Russia is this failed country, a failed state. It can't function. It can't feed its people. It's just a totally corrupt, it can't do anything, basically. Dysfunctional nation. At the same time, they can do anything. They can hack the Pentagon. They can hack Yahoo. They can take out Facebook. They're in God mode, basically. Now, which is it? Are they a collapsed, failed, ghetto-ass country? Or are they in God mode? Which one? It can be both of these. It doesn't make any sense. And again, Hillary keeps reinforcing this. She never lets it up. So we know this is a created CIA narrative. And who's the CIA? Oh, it's these people, right? These people are 100%. She was, Secretary of State, right? I would be your president, except for Russia and the FBI. And this is Washington Post. So she can't even, well, of course, she's a psychopath. She can't admit that she screwed up her own campaign and that she just was so beyond, infinity corrupt that she's her own worst enemy. No, it's everyone else, but in total psychopath, right, MO, it's everyone else but me. And we know that, again, there's absolutely no evidence yet. There's no proof. Nothing has shown that it was Russia who somehow hacked the elections. Just total nonsense. Then we go across to the CIA operations in Ukraine, where, once again, false flag blamed on Russia. Who does, quote, Ukraine blame for a fatal ambush on husband and wife fighters, supposedly? Oh, Russia. So it's Russia's fault. So this is just everywhere in the news. You search for this, and it's just all these hundreds of articles. Russia's behind this. Russia's behind that. It's. I don't know. What do you make of it? It's unfathomable. Like, it's hard to make sense of that. who really believes this? I mean, you have to be the most brain bombed, empty husk, Cleafot or something to actually believe this constant tale, which again makes no sense. That Russia is basically behind every evil thing in the world. German parliament hacked. Who does German parliament blame? Russia. Now, the CIA is all up in Germany. I mean, they pretty much, run that country. So we're starting to notice again, Spain blames Russia. Hillary blames Russia. Hollywood perverts, sicko, booty freaks blame Russia. Pokemon Go is a tool of Russia. Yahoo blames Russia. German intelligence blames Russia. On and on and on. The FBI trying to blame Russia. Right? Comey blame Russia. And it goes on and on and on. And there is absolutely no evidence yet. And so this last week, there have been a couple news stories claiming to have evidence of who's behind hacking. And the sources for the evidence are Western intelligence, private intelligence firms, right? Like a bunch of like Biden firms and neocon firms. Of course, neocon firms are going to sell this stuff. That's because, why does all this matter? How does this relate to the QAnon stuff? It's all connected because this is the fear narrative that they've erected, right? Like in the Cold War, all the commies are going to get us, right? Then it was the terrorists, right? We're going to get us 9/11. Now it's the new boogeyman is Russia. They're going to get us. They're hacking everything. It's not Russia hacking everything any more than North Korea was hacking everything with their Commodore 64s. No, it's the CIA running these large-scale operations in all of these countries where they have preeminent influence through the German intelligence networks. Again, all of these intelligence networks, remember, out of World War II are set up by the Western establishment. British intelligence, CIA, right? British intelligence sets up the OSS and the CIA. British intelligence and the CIA and the Mossad together British intelligence sets up Mossad with the aid of Otto Skorzeny and Reinhard Gehlen. You can't make that up. But yes, that's absolutely true. German SS helped set up Mossad. Then German intelligence is also then converted into basically adjunct of the CIA. And so most of the NATO countries and their intelligence apparatuses, they're all in line and they're all working with, right? Just like in the Spectre movie, The Nine Eyes, right? This is Western intelligence. GCHQ, NSA, CIA. Yeah, there might be little minuscule squabbles between them at times, but again, the Western power block is all run by the same entity and they're all under the same elite rich families. And yes, there are very, very wealthy Saudi princes and Rothschilds. That's essentially what we're looking at here. Now we come to very recently the New York Times and its publication in October 17th of Soros transferring $18 billion, the largest ever transfer, as they say here, of a private donor to a foundation. It even tops Bill and Melinda Gates' donations. Now, this article is important because it shows you the reach and the influence of Soros, and it backs up all kinds of stuff that I've been talking about for years. Now, I wrote an article, too, that I want to reference you to here in a second. But what do we want to notice that's key here is that this is an image and an insight into how the world really works and how it's run. And so in this aspect, the Q questions are good questions. They're asking the right kinds of questions. And what they ask is, several questions relating to Soros. I'm not going to read them all. But Soros is crucial because he has influence in 120 nations. So that's a wider scope of influence than the Ford Foundation in terms of the modern world. So what we have is these interlinking networks of NGOs and think tanks. This is what's in The Godfather 3. When Q linked to and asked questions about Godfather 3, that's why they said that. And I did numerous talks and analyses on Godfather 3. You can find my interviews with Tim Kelly about Godfather and Godfather 3 that are on YouTube. They've had 20,000 views. You can find my articles on The Godfather, again, tens of thousands of views, and talks, again, there multiple, probably 5 or 6 that dealt with that topic. That is why Q, I'm not saying that Q necessarily mentioned it because of my site, but that's why people were thinking that I was this person. But what I'm getting at here is that this influence is left-wing causes, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, social justice warriors, Femin. Social justice warrioring is what Soros is behind. That's why this matters. So the rise of leftism, transhumanism, right, which Jacques Attali, the globalist, says is the vanguard of the New World Order. This is all from Soros. Soros tops the Ford Foundation in the last 2 decades, as the New York Times article says. This is also why Hungary started fighting back and trying to get Soros out of Hungary. This is why Russia started trying to get Soros out of Russia, banning Soros NGOs. Who's behind the Ferguson and Ohio riots? Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Soros. You see, now that people are starting to put these pieces together, and it's not just George Soros. There's other characters, Rockefellers, right? Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation, Rothschilds. These big families do this exact same thing. Clinton Foundation, McCain Foundation. It's the exact same model that all of these people do over and over and over. And it's all dependent upon people not figuring out that this is how they do it. This model of the NGO, the private foundation, Godfather 3, that's the whole point of that movie. And that's what I talked about in my article from 2015, ISIS feminist thugs, dupes of the foundations and think tanks. They're the key vanguard in the private billionaire, trillionaire power blocks, elites, mobsters, that use these front piece dummies to go out and do their bidding. Arab Spring, right? Same people behind that. Now, isn't it interesting that this article had, I think, about 800, 900 shares. And what did Facebook do? Scrubbed it down to 0. No, Facebook, this had 800 shares. It didn't have 8, maybe 900, maybe it was 1,000. I can't remember, but it was a lot. It didn't have 0. I can tell you that. So we see what's going on here. I am hitting on the whole picture. I'm giving you the full picture. I'm nailing this stuff, and that's why I'm banned on Facebook. It's not. I'm starting to think that now. It's not because of dirty words. Infinite people use infinite dirty words. There's not even enough dirt. There's more. How could everybody would be banned from Facebook if it were because of dirty words? Come on. Now, I'm not saying it was like specifically Mark Zuckerberg was like, trolling my page and he was freaking out. I'm saying it's an algorithm that probably picked people who have a certain political bent or their name is out there in terms of alt media or something like that, and then that's how the algorithm targeted those people in a certain profile is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Mark Zuckerberg was using a fake profile and trolling me. But next, what I want to talk about is the Rand Corporation. Well, now before we get to the Rand Corporation, in this important document, let's talk about why this whole narrative is falling apart in terms of Clinton Foundation and the Russian deal. Now, I'm going to show you what the long-term plan is, why all this stuff really matters and what it really connects to. Nobody else has made this point. Well, Patrick did, but he made it, and I made it in my video about Logan's Run, and Henrik made it. But notice here that what we have in this article from 2015, and this is, of course, prior to the election, this was damaging. And, you know, Hillary, obviously, I guess whoever put this on the New York Times was maybe a Bernie bro or something like that. But the point of this is that it showed a very clear attempt on the part of Hillary, as she's done many times, to seek for her own private benefit through these deals in government, right? I mean, that's kind of common sense. I mean, that's what these foundations are for, right? To avoid taxes, to shuffle money around and so forth outside of the purview of, quote, government. So what Hillary has done here is, in this case, was try to set up this deal where they could sell off the U.S. rights to a uranium mine in Kazakhstan to a Russian company. Okay, so this was covered in this book, Clinton Cash, which I think Breitbart has for sale. But the point is that this was another one of these scams where they try to they're utilizing their public office for private profit, right? That's the basic, most simple level of the scam here. But I want to point out that this is where it starts to tie into Hollywood. So we see that what's his name? Here we go. One of these business buddies of Hillary, Justra held a fundraiser for the Clintons' Justra Sustainable Growth Initiative, a project aimed at here come the Hollywood people in to promote this. They raised $100 million. Elton John, Shakira, Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Robin Williams. Oh, Robin Williams didn't last too long, did he? Autoerotic asphyxiation. That's usually a marker of being killed by an intelligence agency of some kind. British intelligence, maybe. The evening generated $16 million in one evening. Justra had pledged $100 million. Now, what are these Hollywood phony balonies promoting? They're promoting the Clinton Sustainable Growth Initiative. Now, one of the big things that the Clinton Foundation is involved in, which many people may not know, is the idea of sustainable development, Agenda 21, and smart cities. Right, Al Gore type stuff. Why do the smart cities and all that matter so much? Well, let's look. So we look at Cisco, the tech giant. There's this old post here, 2005, where the Clinton Foundation launched the Clinton Global Initiative, which was about changing the world and changing CO2 emissions and ultimately getting everybody into smart cities. That's what this is really all about. So they're talking about freeing up congested cities. And here you come over to the Clinton Foundation site. And how is this going to be achieved? Through giving everybody Wi-Fi and 5G and all that crap, as the tech companies talk about. But when you come over, they actually have publicly on their page, right, the Clinton connections to the rise of all the smart cities. Now, who's behind all of that? Who brought the Clintons to prominence? Remember the Bilderberg meetings? Remember the meetings of a certain wealthy man with Hillary and Bill and all that? Who is also the mastermind of all this smart city stuff and the Agenda 21 carbon stuff. Pollution. Man is the cause of pollution. None other than David Rockefeller. So when you're looking at the Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Foundation, all that, you're looking at a guy, again, Rockefellers are headquartered in Arkansas. Okay, where does Bill come from? Arkansas. That's who this is behind all this. That's why they're behind smart cities, right? Getting you in the coffin apartments. And you can see it all laid out here. That's why it's not so much that Trump is necessarily a good guy. It's that Trump stands in the way of the carbon climate depopulation agenda. I think this is the real problem that they have, is that, Trump does, for all of his faults, he seems to pretty consistently not be on board with this CO2 scam. So the rest of it really doesn't matter. This because this is the real plan, right? This is the crucial aspect of the plan. The real essence of the New World Order is the green agenda and getting everybody into the smart city, because that's where the depopulation and the large-scale social engineering testing can be done through the AI. And that was actually in the news this week too, that the Minority Report, pre-crime stuff will be in the smart cities. I said that years ago. And I said that because not just because Philip K. Dick, who wrote about it, was in Silicon Valley circles, but because I came across these lectures by the IBM CEO a long time ago, and she was saying that. So if you want to see more on that, then you're going to understand what's going on with the Saudi stuff. Go watch my video. You won't believe how Logan's Run predicted the dystopian mega smart city, because the Saudi smart city, NEOM, is being invested in heavily by the Israelis and the new crown prince. And this is, of course, partly why there was this big roundup, as we'll see here in a second. The roundup of corrupt Saudi princes. But it's not just Saudis, and it's not just Bill Gates, or it's not just the Clintons. Bill Gates wants his own smart city. $80 million to build an Arizona smart city. This is all a trap, I'm telling you. And when all this comes into being, I want you to remember, this video will probably be gone. I'll probably delete all this, but I want you to remember that I told you that this was a trap. And I'm telling you that because it's obvious. Okay, watch Logan's Run. That's the point of that movie. So why does Bill Gates, and it's not just Bill Gates, guess who else? Google's founders want to shape a city. So they want to redo Toronto as a smart city. And what's going to happen is you're not going to have cars. Cars are going to be forbidden. And these cities are going to be privately owned. So Google is going to be able to say who comes and who goes. Notice these little coffin apartments everywhere. You're going to be trapped in these places too, by the way. They probably won't let you out. It'd be like a dystopian movie. Go watch Code 46 with Tim Robbins. It'd be like that. But see, this is the real long-term plan, is that to get to this stage, they have to have a lot of crises, a lot of fake environmental nonsense that they just make up wholesale, all the green carbon stuff, the calls for depopulation. And again, who's the major money behind all that? Rockefellers and Rothschilds. That is the ultimate plan. So all the stuff that we're seeing playing out now ultimately relates to the selling of this stuff. Even the stuff in the Middle East too, by the way. That stuff's not unique. I mean, again, the Saudis are building a giant smart city, NEOM, with billions of dollars from Israeli companies. So part of selling this city, you see, is the urban hipster social justice warrior, right? The Antifa, Black Lives Matter, feminists, SJW. That's who likes these places. Just go to any city where they're doing all this gentrification, urbanization, all that, renovating these areas, and that's who lives there. Okay, this is what it's like in Nashville. They're unbearable. And so to sell this, you need all these billions of dollars of Soros pushing the SJW stuff. All right, so it's aimed at the youth, the millennials and younger, right? They're not worried about people our age and older. They're thinking in terms of the next 50 years, next 100 years. And they'll be able to take the millennial zombies and the whatever the generation after that is, and easily herd them into these places, because they won't have any conception of what farming is or what living in the country, or why would you even want to do that? Why would you even want to go fishing? Why would you even want to do that kind of stuff? Just stare at your screen all day, right? Like that Black Mirror episode. So this is the real plan. And this is not a plan bound by any single race. Okay? This is the big plan. And this is what nobody seems to be putting together, is the overall picture. So all of the top billionaires and trillionaires, right, Rothschild types, that's why they're all involved in this, in these big smart cities. And the way to get to these smart cities is decades of social engineering through the SJW Soros stuff to sell people on living in this kind of a lifestyle, right? Selling people on austerity, selling people on being poor, selling people on veganism is going to be another big part of this. Don't forget that, because these places, as we know from the Plandopolis video from the UK think tank that I've shared countless times and put in numerous videos, the Plandopolis videos say you're not going to be eating meat. So not eating meat is going to be conditional. And you think I'm joking. You're not going to be free in these places. These places are going to have, like zoning laws for weird communities where they're starting. They've been popping up for the last few decades. Like areas will have these very strict zoning laws and neighborhood codes where your yard's got to be mowed to a certain length, and you can't have a basketball court out front. You can't have a pool except for a certain size, and all these just out there wacko rules if you want to live in one of these uppity suburban areas in different places, right? So this has been going on for a while now. That was to prepare people for an even crazier level of regulations that are going to be in place for living in these kinds of places. And every apartment is going to have cameras. Every apartment is going to be surveilled. It's straight up 1984. Did you see Blade Runner? Right? When Ryan Gosling goes back to his apartment, he lives in one of these giant tech high-rises. The whole building is a computer system. And he interacts with a hologram that is, the central AI from the corporation that runs the city. So go watch Blade Runner. There's your smart city. Doesn't that look fun, right? With all the whores and junkies and heroin addicts, hanging around, and like you think that it's going to be, Tomorrowland or something like that Disney movie. I'm telling you, man, this is a social experiment to get you into these arenas, to get you into these boxes, and it's a rat maze. It's world as laboratory. What better laboratory than a giant surveilled? I mean, look at this. Looks like the Panopticon prison of Jeremy Bentham, and it's not just going to have like one central spying booth with 3 or 4 guards like an 1700s prison. It's going to have little RFID and cameras and everything in your apartment. So, I mean, look at the apartments in China. How people make these YouTube videos of how they live in like a closet. That's what this is going to be. Now, yes, wealthier people will have a little more room, but they're just as much dupes, and that's heart of all this. So what's going on now does matter, because it all is the prelude to taking people to this. And that's what I've been trying to show you with the Saudi princes, with Neom, with Bill Gates' smart city, with Google smart cities, with the IBM smart cities, with driverless cars, with all the surveillance. The surveillance is not terror, obviously, and it's not just blackmail. The surveillance is conditioning people for total surveillance inside these planned smart cities. And what they're going to do is and H.G. Wells and Kessler talk about this kind of stuff is you got to make it trendy. So they're going to sell all this as trendy. You know, you're going to live in Spaceship City, and it's going to be like Star Trek. That's what H.G. Wells says. And everything will be AI and automated and all this stuff. It'll be so great, but it's not. It's a giant experiment run by mad scientists. Now, when we come to the phenomena of the so-called shooting epidemic, which I think much of what we're shown is not real and is staged or is hyped or are false flags. In the case of these shootings, how does this fit into this? Why do we keep seeing this rash of shootings? Well, as we've said many times, this is ultimately conditioning. It's conditioning people to not like the idea of having guns, the idea that, the gun ownership is what causes somehow all this madness and nonsense of people becoming unhinged, and none of which is true, but it doesn't matter that they just keep promoting that. And how does this tie into the smart cities? Well, here you go. The smart cities systems are going to have gun detection software. They're going to use software that's going to detect not just gunshots, but also who has guns. And do you have a permit? And our smart city doesn't allow guns, you see. So what I'm getting at is that the reorganization of the Middle East, yes, it has to do with oil, it has to do with pipelines, it has to do with minerals, it has to do with geopolitical interests, Israel versus Iran or whoever, Saudi Arabia's interests, yeah. But what I'm saying is that the realignments, like in the Middle East, are in a way, in the long term, similar to the realignments that are going to be happening in the U.S. So all this destabilization by these Soros-funded groups and by these so-called mass shooters, this, I think, is intended. It may not actually happen, but the goal is to reorganize society. They're going to say, look at how the old way society ran, and it was nothing but chaos, and it was nothing but mass shootings, and it was nothing but terror, and it was nothing but all of this nonsense that's not actually a real threat. So what we've got to do in private property, right, you having and owning a house, I'm not talking about monopoly capitalism, which we agree is terrible, but I'm just saying just owning a house, right? This is what H.G. Wells says. That's the problem here. So what we're going to do is completely reorganize society. And now how do you completely reorganize society? Well, it's going to take more than just the Industrial Revolution. This is what Brzezinski talks about in Between Two Ages, right? It's going to take a whole revitalizing, a whole revolution to reorganize the totality of society in man's biosphere. So you need constant destabilization that's made to happen. They make sure that the destabilization happens for many, many decades. And then you sell people on the solution, which is your solution, which is the smart cities. So get out of the rural areas, or they're going to, try to pass laws, eminent domain or something to get people out of rural areas, or they'll try to kill off people in rural areas through who knows what, spraying, biowarfare, I don't know. I'm talking about down, long-term stuff. Or just socially engineer and get the children of people in rural areas to eventually just move to the cities because of, look how great and utopian and sexy it is, and it's just all sex and fun and concerts and whatever. And everybody has Wi-Fi, everybody has 5G, all this stuff. In 20, 30 years, right, they would like to have the total revitalization of the metropolitan areas into big, huge megalopolises, megacities. And the megacities, ultimately, they would like to have as smart cities. And what I'm getting at is that you're not going to have a gun in a smart city. That's the point. That's the real kicker here. So when we look at this excellent piece that Patrick Henningsen at 21st Century Wire did, this sheds some light on what's been going on with the Saudi stuff, because basically you have a coup by the new prince of Saudi Arabia. Palace coup, getting rid of all the challengers, and it could lead to warfare with Lebanon and Hezbollah. But what I wanted to point out was that there was, where is it? Here we go. Yeah. That the Crown Prince has this Vision 2030, right? And Vision 2030 is all about revitalizing Saudi Arabia for NEOM. The what? The smart city. So if you watch those smart city interviews for NEOM, you have all those trillionaire, billionaire type people there saying, oh, this is so great because Saudi Arabia formerly had oil, but guess what? We're not going to be needing that much oil in the future economy because you won't be driving cars. So the smart cities will be, using all these sustainable forms of energy or whatever. And so Saudi Arabia, that was formerly the pioneer of oil, will now be the pioneer of the smart city. And this one's huge, right? This was like way more money going into this one than even the Bill Gates one. And so this is, again, the Saudis are very, very wealthy, right? So they occupy one aspect of the pyramid, right? They're not the only ones, right? There are also powerful Israelis. There are powerful Saudis. There are powerful WASP families like the Rockefellers, and there are powerful Rothschilds. So you've got very, very, very wealthy, and there's wealthy, Japanese elites and Chinese elites too. So you've got a bunch of different elites here, and they're all, what are they all committed to? Well, they're not all committed to, the Talmud, but they are all committed to killing everyone, 100%. And so it could be that just because Donald Trump is not committed to killing everyone, right, then that's why he's perceived as problematic to the rest of this club. So I think this is an important article. This reads very well, and it shows the joint interests of the Saudis and the Israelis in this smart city. And you thought Saudis and Israelis didn't like each other. No, that's not necessarily true, because this is the international business level. That now I want to zoom back in. We're going to go back we went into the future, into Star Trek, and we're going to go back in time to 2011, because this good article here at Newsbud, Sibel Evans' site, really just kind of reaffirms and backs up all the stuff that I did many videos and articles on. The stuff that Syrian Girl has talked about for a long time. The stuff that Patrick Henningsen's written hundreds of articles on at 21st Century Wire. But this is another good kind of summation of exactly what the plan was and how it went down in Syria. And we're zooming back in because we're going to see that, again, the reorganization of the Middle East has multiple purposes and uses. But I think that ultimately, yes, the smart city plan is not just for the West. It's global, right? That's why it's the Clinton Global Initiative. They're globalists. But this article is great because it talks about the admissions from all these characters. Let's see, who's the first one here? Qatari politician Hamad bin Yassim bin Jabal Al Thani. Get a nickname, bro. On Qatari television, admitting, yes, we basically used all these jihadis because we wanted to get rid of Assad. Yeah, exactly. That's not a conspiracy theory. And yes, as we've been saying for years, it was Jordan and Turkey, which were the conduits, and the GCC countries, right, to give weapons, right, and arm the opposition in Syria. So here's one of their politicians saying this. Yes, Muslim Brotherhood, Western asset, yes, very helpful. Yes, it's the 7-nation plan that General Wesley Clark said from long ago. Yes, 9/11 was used as part of this to justify torture and the expansion of the agenda. Yes, Cy Hirsch was right when he talked about the fake news and the fake stories. Yes, the WikiLeaks cables all backed up the claims. Yes, other politicians in other countries figured this out and went public about it. Yes, Freedom House and the National Endowment for Democracy and the Rand Corporation masterminded all this and agitated for it. This is what we're going to see. This is interesting. And yes, it was all back to the Bush administration when the planning was done. Pre-2011 plans for Syria. Yes, that's all true. But we want to look at this Rand Corporation. This I found fascinating. Because, I mean, we already knew this. It's kind of common sense. Where'd it go? Rand Corporation. I just saw it and I went past it. Anyway, here it is. Rand, the Long War. What does this Rand Corporation document actually say? Here it is. It's public. Again, so many of these documents are all public. They don't hide it. Unfolding the future of the Long War, motivations, prospect, implications for the U.S. Army. When was this? 2010 or 11, somewhere in there. But it talks about 2008, excuse me. The Long War. What does this mean? What is the Long War? Well, I'm going to show you in this great quote here on page 16. Scrolling for a bruising. I think this is it. Yes. What does all this mean? Divide and rule focuses on exploiting fault lines between the various Salafi jihadist groups to turn them against each other and to dissipate their energy on internal conflicts. This is one of the key strategies, of course, of globalists. This relies heavily on covert action. So we're using covert action in the Middle East and Syria? I thought we didn't do that. Info war, right? Unconventional warfare tactics. This is espionage, assassinations, and indigenous security forces divide and rule would set them all against one another. Information operation campaigns to discredit transnational jihadis in the eyes of local populace. Blah, blah, blah. Sustain the Shia-Sunni conflict. So this is hype up Sunnis against Shiites. Now, in the Western media, the idiot public is taught that all Islam is one. Right? They're all the same. They're all jihadis. But when Rand Corporation writes documents for the army, they say the reality, which is exacerbate Sunni versus Shia. Shrink the swamp here. This is interesting. They're not talking about Trump, but anyway, there you have it. In this, Rand Corporation document, just straight up saying that the army engages in basically a bunch of covert operations and psyop warfare, everything evil you can think of, and you just get them all to fight one another. And so it's a lot of times when these documents are referenced, it's worth going and looking at them, and you just find all this. It's just there's endless nuggets that explain how the world really works everywhere and all this stuff. So anyway, this guy's article goes on, which is pretty good, and it basically just says that years and years of sustained Western information warfare operations were not successful in toppling Assad. It wasn't successful because like 90% of the population was in favor of Assad, and all the fake news and agitprop just wasn't working. They couldn't get it to stick, and essentially the operation has failed. Now, I'm sure they're going to keep trying. They're not giving up or anything like that, but they have not succeeded so far in winning this attempted toppling of Assad, which, as we saw, was right in line with the plan, the total plan, back to Saddam. Remember, there's the whole 7-nation plan. So there's Iraq and Libya, and those two they did. Again, Hillary's WikiLeaks literally talked about stealing Gaddafi's gold. and then paying off all the pay-to-play people who wanted a slice of the pie for the resources and gold in Libya. And it was no different for the plan here in Syria. Next, exact same model for this different region. And what you start to see is that that's what they're doing everywhere. They do the same thing. And these kinds of strategies, which this guy talks about, agitation, NGOs, right? That's being done domestically. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Think of all the race riots, race hype that all the Soros money's gone into, right? The supposed assassination of the police in Dallas, snipers, right? SJWs everywhere. That's the same model. The same people behind the SJWs, the same money behind that is behind this. And it was specifically Soros, NGOs in Syria, in the Arab Spring, right? On and on and on. So you're starting to see this is how the whole system works. Now, yes, it's propped up ultimately by the Federal Reserve System and the BIS, and that's what we want to look at next. The BIS didn't go away. All right, this wasn't just a World War II, OSS thing back then, Bretton Woods thing. No, this is still in the background, and let's see how. So over at Global Research, there was a good article published, Totalitarian Europe Now on Our Doorstep, and this is about the money behind the creation of the EU super army. The reason this matters is because it is the BIS that is in the background of the creation of this. And the BIS didn't go away, right? I mean, this is still how the whole world economy is run. And this author gets it correct that they have an anti-life worldview, right? It's a covenant with death, as the Bible says. And so what they want to do is create this European EU army, which will help, right, the integration and the creation of the EU superstate beyond what it already is. And this is just another link in the chain of the Western establishment. But the reason it matters is because this will be even further aggression against Russia. And that's because the EU and NATO constantly vilify Russia as the great threat to world stability. No, this is the threat to world stability. What did we just read the Rand Corporation document saying? Cause destabilization, cause crisis. Right? So the people who are behind this are the ones who want crisis and destabilization so that they can reorganize society into the smart cities. So again, we're back to Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it. It's Russia, 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 Russia. Everything Russia. No, it's not. It's the elite trying to use these different fronts and shells to fool everybody into thinking that it's some boogeyman over in some other country. Oh, it's Kim Jong-un. No, Kim Jong-un and all that nonsense, that's all CIA theater. And that's precisely why we shouldn't buy into the boogeyman narratives at all anymore. Every one of the boogeyman narratives of the past several decades, at least, we know are false. I'm sure, boogeyman narratives prior to that were definitely false with false flags, but I'm saying Bin Laden, fake boogeyman, Kim Jong-un, fake boogeyman, Russia, not a real boogeyman, the commies are going to get us all. Well, who's funding the commies? Oh, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, the elite. You see. Where do they get their money? Same people that fund the fascists. That's who. So that's the key here, is that this is how the game is run. And the centralization and the social engineering that's happening through all the crises, the sustained long war of crises, which is not just about the Middle East, right? Again, understand that Rand Corporation document is talking about the Middle East, yes, but that is also talking about the strategies that the Pentagon is going to use in its information warfare tactics on its own population, right? Because a big part of psychological warfare is also controlling your people's perception. So that's key. And what we're seeing here is the totality picture. I'm giving you the totality picture of how all this stuff works and runs. That's what I'm trying to do, at least. And in terms of the banking system, the tip top of the bank stuff is the BIS. And the BIS, as it is explained here, is who calls the shots for the World Bank and the IMF. And then after that comes the ECB, the Federal Reserve, and the Bank of England. So this is the top of the pyramid here. Once you understand that, you can start to figure out that, oh, okay, so that's how the whole system works in this Rothschild fiat money system, as Quigley says. All right, the first several hundred pages of Tragedy and Hope. Go listen to my Tragedy and Hope talks. And that system hasn't changed. It's become, tech now. It's all based around binary, cashless currency type stuff and transferring digits, flash trades, and all that. But it's still the same type of fiat fake system. And no, I'm not saying that just going back to gold will fix anything, because they own the gold for the most part. They can control the gold market. So really, it's figuring out that this is the root of the problem here, and the way that these elites are able to game the system so often and so well is precisely because of the control that they have through this centralized entity here, the BIS, and its adjuncts, the World Bank, the IMF, the ECB, Federal Reserve, and the Bank of England. And then by extension, the other countries out there's their central banks, right? And there's only very few that don't have the same Rothschild central bank model. That's as far as I can tell, that's true. And it's all spins out of this BIS. You've been listening to my breakdown of the big picture pyramid story, right? And can we use the 4chan Q clearance anonymous patriot quote leak as an exercise in analysis? And I think that we can. We've seen that a lot of those questions, regardless of who asked them or why they're being asked, they are good questions that point us in the right direction of actually putting together how the world really works. And North Korea, right, as a staged kind of operation theater, you have the mentions of Soros and the Trump campaign and all that. All those are kind of windows or pictures into foundations and agitation and NGOs, et cetera, et cetera. Everything that we talked about in the last couple hours. You also have the issue of PR firms, creating and controlling stories, which is what the Fusion GPS nonsense is about. PP Gate, all made up, all fake. Made up by spies, by the way. Come on. The first thing you ought to do when you hear that a spy has made something up is doubt it. Right? They're lying for some reason. So what we're going to do is stop it there. And if you're a subscriber to Jay's Analysis, you will get the full talk, which will be available tomorrow. So I spent the last several days reading hundreds of pages. I've got printed out basically a giant stack of stuff that I have completely sifted through. And what we're going to do is, this is part one, the free half, and tomorrow what will be available to Jay's Analysis subscribers for $4.95 a month or for $60 a year if you subscribe at the website of the PayPal links. What will be available is the second half. In the second half, we will cover not just the geopolitical stuff, but we'll get into the spiritual aspects of it. We're going to get into Hollywood. We're going to get into the ideas of and problems of liberal democracy. In an essay that I read, we're going to talk about mind control and MK Ultra, and a whole bunch of new information I found on that topic. And we're going to talk more and more specifically about cases of blackmail that I read on in terms of Heidi Fleiss and Deborah Jean Palfrey, the DC Madam, and how that relates to Hollywood and Weinstein and what's going on with all that. And we'll see, I think, that we're looking at a whole other side of the pyramid, another face of the pyramid, right? That's not just politics and geopolitics and NGOs and all that, but we also got to consider religion and Hollywood, cults and the occult. And we will do that in the second hour. That will be available tomorrow. I can't do everything all in one day. I'm sorry. I'm trying. I do this nonstop every day. And thank you all. You can subscribe also and support at Patreon. I also do counseling and tutoring. Consulting and tutoring, I guess, not counseling, consulting and tutoring in regard to these topics. I have several paid clients now who have signed up. We don't have to use Patreon. You can do it directly with me. And everybody is very happy with that so far. We do in-depth discussions on whatever topic you want, at least that I'm proficient in. I'm fairly proficient in all these topics that we talk about, some more than others. I'm more proficient in philosophy and theology and history. But I'm getting better at geopolitics, and that's what we're doing here, is piecing all this together. And we'll be talking about that in the second hour at Jay's Analysis, available tomorrow. So today's work was this. And again, this is all I've done all week is study this. Hundreds of pages read for you. Thank you all so much. You can also buy my book, Esoteric Hollywood, Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film, as you see here. You can go to the website, click on the image of the book, and I have the inside and outside the US PayPal options. As you can see, Facebook didn't scrub this. It's been shared over 1,000 times. I have over 100 5-star reviews. And you can also watch my show with Jay Widener, Hollywood Decoded, available at Gaia TV. This last week we did 2 Christopher Nolan films. We did Inception and we did Interstellar. Very good episodes. I think you'll enjoy those quite a bit. We get into a lot of philosophy. We get into a lot of theology. We get into some deep Platonic stuff, mathematics. I think you'll really like those episodes. And thank you for watching this. And again, I think tomorrow I'll have part 2 dealing with religion, cults, blackmail, and Hollywood.